ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I'll start with a question. Do you know how the world will look within, let's say, 15 years? Who knows? No one. Okay. Will everything we are researching on this moment and developing now be a success? No. No, we don't know what future will be, and we know sure we are researching now will not be in every case a success. So there will be failures. And the question is, why is it so hard to accept failures? For us, governmental side, but as citizens as well. The future develops with success and failures and success. It's not going from A to B, but it's like this, going down, going up, going down, etc. By the way, what is a failure? Do you know that 90% of all research, medical research, can be seen as a failure? 90% of the research in the medical sector is, the outcome of the research is not according to the hypothesis you started with. But is it a failure? This outcome is bringing new success. On the shoulders of failures, new success will be built. And if we don't know how future will like in the future, we have to experiment. We have to do some experiments together to find out what will be a proper way. But are we allowed to do the necessary experiments? No, we are not. The national government, in our case, do not allow us, local partners, to experiment. And that's key problem number one. I tried some, but I came nearly always in conflict with our national government, because I was looking for new developments beyond the boundaries of the existing regulation and legislation. And they didn't allow me. So we couldn't find a way to the future in this kind of experiments. Legislation is blocking future. I've been in the House of Parliament, you told me, just told us, in the House of Parliament, member of the House of Parliament, for nearly 13 years. I was involved in quite a lot of legislative processes. For example, the legislation regarding to our public transport system. It dated from November 1997. I had heard at that moment about internet. It was the time we used the IBM, the floppies, and we copied with the wrong zeros. It's that time. I'd heard about internet, I'd never used it. In this law, you will not find any sense of a digital world. It's still the existing legislation in the Netherlands for the public transport system, including the taxi world. That is how we organize our public transport system. And let me explain. There are three kinds, no, I have to go, There are three kinds of legislation. And that's very important to understand. I've tried to tell you on a simple way. There's a legislation about values. They're long-lasting. It's about the constitutional things like liberty and your own body and that kind of things. Then we got a legislation about the structure. We call it the organic legislation, the way we organize and finance our public structure. And we got legislation about systems. Our systems, that means legislation about our educational system, our public health system, our public transport system, our energy supply system, our water system, our food system, our housing system, all kinds of systems in society. We organize with legislation. Nearly all, when you really think about it, nearly all these systems are related to the grand challenges we are facing on this moment. The grand challenges we are facing mainly in the cities. How good you try, and I try it quite often, how good you try to make a law as actual as possible, you never know what will be the new possibilities that's coming up tomorrow. So, especially in the time of disruption, in the best case, you regulate the actual situation. And this is key number 2. because it means in practice you defend the actual system, the actual actors. It blocks the futures. Unless you allow us to experiment, or local governments together with all the other partners to experiment, there will be a problem number 3. So I give you 3 problems. The first one is you need the experiment and it's not allowed. The second one is that the legislation is protecting the past. And the third one is, and I call it the vertical world, it's the traditional world from the national government going down, is remain to try to keep themselves in position. Well, the 20th century will be the century of the cities. The 19th century was a century of the national states. After the French Revolution in 1789, the national constitutional state had to be established to make sure the equality and liberty became really implemented. All citizens are equal in their relation to the state. To organize this constitutional state in the Netherlands, but it happened everywhere, more or less in all the Western countries, all legislation was centralized. The national level discussed and approved by national parliaments. The implementation was delegated to local governments. We had to implement. We call it in Dutch medebewind. The provincial level had the oversight, the control that we were doing exactly what was said from the top level. The 20th century was the century of the supranational institutes. It's the last century. Because these states had to relate to each other. The Bretton Woods institutes like IMF and World Bank, the United Nations, European Union, World Trade and World Health Organization, and go on. The 21st century will be the century of the cities. What are the most urgent problems we are facing nowadays? Well, there were already, you named them already, some of them. We call it the grand challenges. 80% of the people will live in this century. Within 2 generations, 80% of the people will live in the metropolitan regions. And that is a huge urbanization and a huge assignment for the local governments. An assignment for providing safe and nutritious food, a modern educational system, sustainable mobility system. The same with our energy and sewer system. Enough affordable houses, clean air and water. Well, you can go on with that list. And nearly all these systems are with the actual performance inadequate or outdated. Outdated for the challenges we are facing today and tomorrow. You cannot achieve these goals with regulation and legislation. That's paper. We have to do something not only on paper, but in real life. And real life is what we see in cities, where people are connected with each other. This is the world where we concrete try to find out what will work or not. At the last meeting in Davos, the CEOs of nearly all the corporates were complaining that technological innovations are changing society so fast and fundamentally that it's rather complicated for them. This is the time of disruption. We have to find a way to deal with it. Make new technology useful to solve the grand challenges. Not in a technological order, but in a humanized and circular way. Circular for the sustainability. That is the difference between the smart city approach and the smart society philosophy. Smart city is Cisco. Thinking about technology, bringing it into the city and just say, okay, you buy it, well, and we solve your problems on a technological way. When I talk about smart society, then we implement people of the city itself. We discuss it. We are doing it together in a horizontal way. Connect all the parties. Not only technology, but humanized and circular. That's the key point. I hate to talk about smart cities. Well, you told I'm chair of ICF in New York. We organize 400 technologically driven cities. 400. There's none German city included. It's a pity. It's global. It's really global. But there we talk about intelligent communities. It's still about people. That's in the name itself. I've been quite around the world, and you know, some of you maybe have heard about Songdo and Masdar. Yesterday I was told about smart houses. They are really interfering into your life day, minute by minute in Songdo and Masdar. Technological-driven cities, new cities, well, they look great, but there's no place to live, really live there on a proper way. You cannot solve the problems on a macro level. You can either solve them on a micro level. So it's the meso level, and that's the level of the city where you can find each other, where you can have crossovers, and where you can find the solutions. When we talk about health, we talk about pharmacy, biology, technology, chemistry, but about water, food, and a lot of other things, and all in combination. This meso level is where Benjamin Barber, the author of the book If Mayors Would Rule the World, he clearly explained in this book the significant role of metropolitan meso level in the endeavor to shape a new world. And it's Pablo Castells who tells a lot about it in his book as well, about the network society. And a network society is a horizontal world. The challenges are so complex and the solutions are so comprehensive that answers will not be found within one discipline. So, as a mayor of the city of Eindhoven and as a chair of the Brainport Economic and Social Development Organization, I always work with 5 I's. It's the I's of, well, working together in a pre-competitive phase within the sector itself, within the discipline, to find out new technologies. The second one is the intersectoral cooperation. Like I told you about health, it's a lot of different sectors you have to implement over there. And then we need an interdisciplinary cooperation. There are only 2 cities in the world where designers are working for the local government. It's in Helsinki and in Eindhoven. We ask designers to look to our processes as local government, to our products, and if we can improve them, and ask them to look by the eyes of the citizens, not by the eyes of the government. So they give us new insights, how we can organize and get people involved in our processes. The fourth one is the inclusivity. We cannot do it without the people itself. It's their city. It's their world. It's not owned by the local government. It's not owned by the national government. It's not owned by the corporations. It's the world of the people. So we have to bring them in this process as a central key player. And then the 5th I is the international cooperation. We have to join more than we did in the past. This is the horizontal world. The toolkit of the vertical world, legislation and regulation, a top-down approach, will not provide you the answers necessary to deal with the grand challenges. In California, and I met him, people like Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, Peter Thiel from PayPal, or Tim Draper from the Tim Draper University talk about a society without a government. And he explained it on the following way. Our corporates can provide a cheaper, a better, a cleaner, more sustainable mobility, energy, food. We can do everything. We can keep people longer alive. We can more sustainable mobility, that kind of things. And who is blocking this? The government. The government is blocking this development. So we want to have a society without a government. Do you realize what they are saying? They say we want to have a society from us and not from the people. And the government, it will not be correct in all sides, but we try to do our best, and we have to learn as well. So, and well, when you look to Apple and Google, the question is if they are very good involved in well, everything what is happening in the world. And I think they're mainly interested in their own profits. Saying that this, we have to admit that they got great technologies. Of course, Google and Apple do have great technologies. But we are here for the public interest. And I want to see that you want to see your private interest has been protected as well and recognized. So it's a public and a private interest that has been protected against these corporates. That is why we work in a very advanced, in our region, a very advanced multiple and triple helix structure. We started with a triple helix and we do it now more multiple in our city. It's our model of collaboration has been awarded in 2011, 2010 by the Euro Cities organization as the best model in Europe. We started with this triple helix model in the mid-90s on a moment we were facing a deep economic crisis. The crisis of the transition from a traditional manufacturing economy to a digital, creative, knowledge-driven economy. A crisis in which nearly all, a lot of people working for Philips company went away, the labor place went away to South America and to Asia. This approach, this triple helix approach was successful. In 2011 we were named to be the most intelligent region in the world by ICF in New York. We called us smart cities, the smartest city in the world. We didn't translate it because in Dutch it's slim. The slimste regio in the world. And slim is not only nice in Germany, it's not neither nice in English. The slimmest region in the world. So in 2013, Forbes found out, based on figures of the OECD, that Eindhoven was, and now I quote, hands down the most inventive region in the world, with 22 patents on every 10,000 citizens, comparing to number 2, San Diego, with 8.9 patents on every 10,000. Since 2010, we are by far the strongest growing economy in the Netherlands and have the highest increase of level of income. I think that the way of working together was and still is a vital element in the incredible achievements of the last decade. In November 2014, the Chinese government invited me for a keynote speech about this transition from the manufacturing economy to the creative digital one. The hall of the new expo building in Shanghai was full loaded, and within the front lines the mayors of the 50 largest cities in China. I was a little bit embarrassed. Huge cities. And mine was this. I did my speech and I realized that our developments is not something you can just copy, like you said. Circumstances, moment in time, culture, history, they all are significant bricks in the wall of prosperity. But this trip gave me on that moment in 2014 a completely new insight. The Chinese government wanted a self-shaping economy and no longer a copy-paste one. But I saw 5 huge constraints. The first one is Confucius in China. Confucius is saying, the pupil may not be better than the master. Innovation is that the pupil is better than the master. The second one is Einstein. Einstein once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And that's true. Knowledge was what available is now. But imagination is thinking about the future. That's more important. But imagination is a freedom of mind, and you can not only give it on this part, then you have to give it politically as well. And they are not going to do so in China. The third one is hierarchy. When an engineer is coming to a banker with a new product design, and the banker is looking at it and will say, well, for example, in the Netherlands, this will not work. This material you are using will splitter. Then the engineer is going back to his office and going to find out if it's true and if there is a new material necessary. In China, they are just doing it. And it will splitter. And then they will find out, I don't know what they will do, it's bad for the product development. The fourth one is, you don't know how the world will look like within 15 years. How can you make then plans for 20 years? That's rather difficult. And the last one is, and the most important one, I explained to you about failures. They don't accept failures. They don't accept failures. But the question is, how is it in Germany? Do you accept failures? Is there hierarchy in Germany? All these things. How are you there? And how are we there? So I spoke with several times with Professor Dr. Bauer, the director of the Morgenstadt program from Fraunhofer Institute, and he brought up a metaphor. He said, we in Germany, we make every year a car a little bit better. But you guys in the Netherlands, you are more disruptive. You make new cars. So once in a longer time, And there's no culture in Germany where we easily accept failures. Until this moment, in November 2014, we in the Eindhoven region worked with a program that was based on 5 chapters: basics, business, people, technology, and international program. And this all ended Triple Helix collaboration. All these chapters had their own projects, written in 5 years and an annual program. We were working with a 5-year program as well. With my new insight brought from China, we added a special way of working, a more adaptive one. Adaptive not only in the relation to the content, but to the process as well, and to involve people as well. I can tell you, this is hard. This is hard and difficult to do it adaptive, and to bring people inclusive in this project. You have to change your complete way of working. That is a smart society. It's not easy. It's hard working. It's working together. And I give you an example. We started with a kind of platform on mobility, energy, health, and let's take health. This platform had around 80 participants: doctors, nurses, health or care organization, assurance representative, companies, designers, representative from local government, but above all, just people from the community. They come together and talk about what can we do, what must we do, what do we see, but the most crucial point is the last half an hour. All the participants may bring up ideas they believe in, where is their passion. And one of the first meeting, a company brought up that they had a device, but they didn't know how they had to implement it in the market. And when you put devices, when you put your hand on it, within half a minute, you can find a level of sugar, of iron, of vitamins and minerals. It's a great device. It's a great device. And the question to the members of the platform was, do you want to join an experiment with this device? Well, elderly designers, assurance companies, local government, in totally 15 participants stepped in. A group of older people got such a device at their home. And it was fantastic. It was easy for them. Every day, again, a specific control on the personalized way. After a week, the majority didn't want to use the device anymore. In our system, normally a nurse is coming by twice a week, looking for your sugar level, for your blood pressure, and above all, a chat and a cup of coffee. So the designers came up with a solution and with the idea to add a kind of Skype to this device. A friendly digital connection with the people just around, 10 or 15 people around you. And now the neighbor comes with a Skype connection to you. And he telling the lady next door that he is ill, and if she wants to do the shopping for the meal this day. She is Skyping with another girlfriend and say, well, my neighbor is ill. Will you join me to do the shopping? So she is saying, well, maybe we can cook for him. And they do. And now a system of paid social contact has been replaced by a real social network. That's great. That's great. And guess what? It's not allowed. It's not allowed to do so because of our legislation. All the people like it, and it's a great improvement of their lives, but the national legislation regarding to the health insurance, this device is not reimbursed. So reimbursed. So it's not, and the participating, we were lucky. The participating insurance company said, we are a real believer. So we are going to pay upfront this device to go on and discuss this with our national government. And this gives insight in the horizontal way of working. This would have been impossible in the old way of working together. This is an example of failure and success of an horizontal way of working in an experiment that would never ever been realized with a vertical top-down approach. When I started as a mayor, one of my main goals was to get the national recognition for what we were doing. And so it happened in 2011 when we in the Steiner studio in New York were named to be the smartest region in the world. Then we found out that although we had a lot of knowledge, our commercial earnings capacity were below our competitors. So we intensified with success our business chapter. The strategy called Smart and Strong. After this trip to Shanghai, I told you about the Shanghai trip, we changed it into Smart, Strong and Adaptive. And a couple of weeks later, I realized wow, this is something. It's really old. I thought I had something new with this idea of smart and strong and adaptive, but this is Darwin. It's not the strongest, not the smartest, but the most adaptive species who will survive. And this is exactly the same in the process of failure of success, and this is exactly the same with the cities. It's about smart societies, the most adaptive ones. So we got a kind of slogan in the city is, we explore the future together. We connect people and we make the city. Knowing this, you can see how important it is, the ownership of our data and the algorithms. It should be a public ownership. What we roughly see in the world is that the data in the United States are used for commercial purposes. Data in, well, let's say China or in Asia are used for control purposes. And I want to have a European model. A model where we can use the data to benefit the people in our city and our countries. And that is something we have to come up for. And so there must be a European model rather soon. And this is about, well, how we can connect these cities in Europe. You will understand that I'm very much in favor of an intensive collaboration, share experiments and their results between European cities. The European Union now is an integration of the national states. From the, well, it's necessary, and it must remain, I'm sure about that, but another integration is necessary. It's the integration of the city level between people, schools, companies, and local governments. I told you, you told, I'm world president of ICF in New York. And I wanted to share, as one of the last points, share one of the key targets. The success of the intelligent communities building a digitally powered innovation economy contains a sharp risk that more of our citizens will be left behind, like you told before, will left behind, shut out of the opportunity of civic life by the unrushed going of technology. To lessen that risk, intelligent community pursue digital equality. The change for every citizen to participate in a digital economy and society, regardless income, age of education, of disability. The more equal we can make our citizens in the digital world, the more capable they will be. For me, this is one of the Millennium Goals. Then we're not included, but it has to be added, and we have to fight for it, because this is something that people can really participate in the new world. And to the end, for you, a brain teaser. Although we do not know how the future will look like, we do have a capability to think about it and to be a little bit prepared. Last year, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and we had a lecture about containerization. The container. And without a container, globalization would have been impossible. I never had realized that it so was of such a huge influence. And then I questioned myself, what was before and what will be next? Well, before was, I started in thinking, well, one of the first huge ones is the transportation of shit, literally shit, where our sewer system made it possible to improve the life of citizens and to get a higher density of people working there together and make the industry possible. And then the transportation of energy, electricity. Then the transportation of information, radio and television. Transportation of goods, that was the container. And then nowadays the transportation of data. But what will be next? If you have not any idea, it will be very hard to prepare and to see where other actors are going to start with. Maybe it's a combination. It's a combination of quantum computing. They're working in Waterloo, Canada, very fast. But I think within 5-6 years there will be an introduction of quantum computing. And quantum computing is the same. We had the huge IBM computers to the little chips we are facing now. That transition will happen again with the quantum computing even more. So quantum computing is one, with a boundless capacity. The second one is the blockchain. the self-controlled transactions, worldwide, without any control of a national government. And the third one is artificial intelligence. So when you bring it together, you get a transportation of self-controlled artificial intelligence. Whoa. Is it a dream or a nightmare? When this is the war, there will be not a war with weapons, there will be a digital war. And are they self-controlled? How far are they going in this kind of war, what they are going to do in this digital fight? Is it a dream or a nightmare? And even that we cannot answer. But I know one thing for sure. Don't give the control in the hands of few. And that's the main thing we have to focus on. Don't give the control in the hands of few. I've written a book about the city. It's the city that creates the future. This was only a survey of everything I've written down. It's about my experience, insight in the past, and the present, and the future. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.